Hey Jet fans, welcome back to another video on Jack Talks Jets. Today I'm joined by a very, very special guest today who runs a very successful Jets podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts every single day, as well as the weekly Just Jets podcast. He is approaching 28,000 subscribers over on his YouTube channel, and I'm glad to have Mr. Matt O'Leary on the show. Matt, I really appreciate you taking time to come onto the show, and how are you doing today as we approach the best night in the offseason?
Yeah, you said it, man. I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to the NFL draft 2 weeks from today. This has felt like a really long draft process, so I'm ready for it to get here.
Yeah, speaking of the draft, I said this a couple seconds ago. In my opinion, I think it is the best night of the offseason, not just for the NFL, but for or not, excuse me, not just for the New York Jets, but the NFL as well. But over the past couple of years, it really seems like the Jets have really been the kings of the offseason. Maybe not last season. Of course, that's, free agency, a little bit of a down year for free agency, not the best class. But the draft, I think they really hit the nail in the first round with number 7 with Armand Membu. And quite frankly, I think this year has the potential to be better. So going into this draft season, how are you feeling about the Jets heading into this draft overall? Are you trusting Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji to make the right moves in the first round?
Yeah, I think so. And what they were able to do last year in the first round with Armand Membu, I think, is really exciting. He's a building block piece for this team. But, you look at it, the Jets have 4 picks in the top 50. Clearly, coming off a 3-win season, there's a lot of needs on this team. But I feel like they have the ammunition in the draft to, really do some damage and start moving this roster in the right direction because I think it's really important for the 2026 Jets to take a pretty significant step forward in the win department for these guys to keep their jobs going into 2027. So it really starts here in the 26 draft, laying the foundation for how your 2026 season is going to go.
I agree because I think that there's a lot of buzz that if Aaron Glenn repeats the same way how he did last season, there's a strong chance where we could see another Jeff Ulbrich type situation maybe halfway through the season. If that situation does come, I believe it will be Frank Reich that will take over as the interim head coach. Hopefully that doesn't become a reality. No Jet fan wants to go through that 2 times in 3 seasons. And it's almost unheard of, actually, for any NFL team to go through 2 interim head coaches in 3 seasons, unless you're the Cleveland Browns maybe 10 years ago, if that ever happened. But according to moving on to our first talking point of the day, according to highly reliable and respected NFL draft analysts Daniel Jeremiah and Peter Schrager, the New York Jets are leaning towards selecting Texas Tech edge rusher David Bailey over Ohio State linebacker Arvell Reese at number 2. I think this was a move straight out of left field. Of course, I never counted out the possibility of the New York Jets selecting David Bailey, but all of the roads seem to have pointed towards Arvell Reese at number 2, and to just have that coming out of left field the other day when that column came out, I think it could be a little concerning because I think that Reese, in my opinion, I think brings you more upside, especially for this Jets team who may be running a 4-3, maybe shift to a 3-4, depending on how the situation's going on defense. I think that Reese just gives you more upside as well. Very great at stopping the run, and you can put him back at linebacker to drop into the coverage as well. I get he wasn't really the best at coverage last season with Ohio State. He does have some issues to work on, and I do think he's a better edge rusher overall. But the thing that I like about him more than David Bailey is that I think, like those 2 examples I just named, and the fact that David Bailey really reminds me of Will McDonald too much for me to put 100% trust that he could be the better pick than Reese, because Will McDonald struggles against the run. David Bailey really struggles against the run at times. Sure, I'll give him credit where it's due. Arguably maybe the best pass rusher in this whole draft class. But I think a big problem with the Jets over the past couple of seasons is that their D-line has never been really reliable, even with a solid defense, to really stop the run. And I think that's been a big issue for them over the course of the past few seasons. And if you get a guy like David Bailey in the room, sure, he brings a lot of upside to you, but is that really helping the run stop, which is a very important key that you need to maybe set the tone for that defensive drive? I think Reese brings that better to you. Do you really think the Jets could realistically go with Bailey over Reese at pick number 2? And what are your thoughts on that if that does happen?
Yeah, so I do find it really interesting that this is all kind of coming out at the same time, and I like how you teed it up. This isn't out of nowhere. Like these are very well respected guys in the industry. So I don't doubt that the Jets like David Bailey, and I wonder if this is a little bit of them just, putting it out there so, the whole league doesn't know what they're doing, right? Like they're not telegraphing the pick at pick number 2. I know even like the betting odds shifted today, and now David Bailey is listed as the favorite to go number 2 over Arvel Reese. But to me, if you're asking me today, I still think it's a better chance that Arvel Reese is the pick at number 2 for the New York Jets for a lot of the reasons that you laid out. I think he's a more versatile player. He could play at linebacker. He's learning the edge position, and he's a younger player, which I think has more upside. And for David Bailey, I don't necessarily dislike him as a prospect. I just don't like him as much as Arvel Reese.
Sure.
And for the fit for the Jets, and I like how you laid it out. I think he is, stylistically pretty similar to Will McDonald. I will give Bailey a little bit more credit. I don't think he's great against the run, but I feel like he's a little bit further along than what Will McDonald has shown. But you're right; they're both speed rushers, and unless their plan was we just want a ton of speed on the edge and we're going to kind of clog up the middle with our bigger defensive linemen. You trade for Devondre Sweat, you bring in Oni Mata, and you have, Harrison Phillips is still there and Briggs. I could see why they would like him, but to me, it's not enough. The reasons why you like him isn't enough for me to take him over Arvel Reese for the Jets.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to who's the better athlete as well, and I think that Arvel Reese just comes. In my opinion, I think Reese is the best athlete in this entire draft. I think you could make an argument for Caleb Downs as well, but I think Reese, if you're able to play multiple positions pretty well, I get like I said this a couple minutes ago, he did struggle a little bit in coverage when he played linebacker last season, but his ability to read plays so quickly, his reaction time like this, I think is one of my favorite traits about him, and especially just because. I think that his athleticism is I wouldn't say miles better because of course I think David Bailey is still a really great athlete. I just think that Reese brings you that athletic upside if you take him at number 2. I do think he is the best athlete in this entire draft class. But moving a bit further down the board here, we're gonna go ahead and take a little peek at pick number 16 for the Jets in this upcoming season. There are so many great options that they can go at pick 16, primarily a receiver of any sorts, really. I think that's really the main issue that the Jets really need to cover. That you have names like Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Denzel Boston. Maybe you trade up for Carnell Tate if he falls to pick 7, maybe in pick number 8. Maybe they can go a different direction, like quarterback. They could swing Ty Simpson at 16 if he's still on the board. Maybe they go a Vega Ione. I think that's my least favorite option, I think, so far. I would rather a skill position. I'd rather a receiver or even a tight end like Kenyon Sadiq over that. I actually recently called into Just Jets actually about that, I think a couple weeks ago, about the Kenyon Sadiq. I'm really high on Kenyon Sadiq. I really like him a lot. I think at some point the Jets have to consider maybe getting the best pass catcher available in the draft. And I think that Sadiq brings you that Kyle Pitts type play level. I just want to get your thoughts on your ideal pick at pick 16, the most realistic option maybe the Jets could go?
Yeah, I think Mekhi Lemon at pick 16, I think is my preferred route. I like Cornell Tate more than Mekhi Lemon, but I think that would be a trade up situation. So if we're just talking about 16, I think the dream is that Lemon is there. And if he's not, I think the name we've seen a lot this week too is Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana. And I think
Yep.
that's someone that you have to consider. Sadiq, I totally understand why the Jets would want to consider him. You look at him, he projects as a big slot at the next level. I know he's listed as a tight end, and it's easy to go, well, you just took a tight end in the second round last year. Why do you want to take a tight end in the first round this year? But he's not really your traditional tight end. Mason Taylor would still be your traditional tight end with, Sadiq being a role player in situations, lining up in the slot. I'm sure he would line up a little bit in line. And then even he has lined up in the backfield too. So you could kind of put him all over the field. And I'm with you. I think they need to have some sort of pass catcher with this pick. That is my preference as well, just because, you look at it outside of Garrett Wilson, it gets ugly pretty quick.
Yeah, I think there's a really There's a really big name for me. I wouldn't say a lot of people are projecting him to go in the first round. I would say a lot of people maybe project him to go late first, early second. But to be honest with you, I really wouldn't hate this name at 16, and that's Denzel Boston. I get maybe he doesn't have the most flashy resume, but that is a big-bodied, contested catch receiver who could stretch the field, maybe give some breathing room for not only just Garrett Wilson in the receiving game, but also Breece Hall in the box, right? There's really been no receiver for the Jets that's been able to stretch the field. They wanted Mike Williams to do that, but he only played, what, 7 games, I think, with the Jets in 2024. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way they wanted it to. That was a perfect match, though. Him and Garrett Wilson, I feel like, in hindsight, should have been one of the best receiver duos in the entire NFL that year. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way they wanted. But I think if you start fresh with a young guy like Denzel Boston, again, he may not have the most flashy resume, but I think that he brings you a lot of upside, not only with skill, but with priority as well, because that Jets, they don't, like, in my opinion, I like Mekhi Lemon. I think he's arguably one of the best, if not the most talented receiver in this entire draft class. But I think that getting another slot receiver doesn't make the most sense. I think that maybe they should go after a big-bodied guy like Denzel Boston, like Kenyon Sadiq, to stretch the field, not only give Garrett Wilson some breathing room, but also Breece Hall in the box. Do you think that the Jets maybe could take a jab or a little bit of a reach at Denzel Boston? And what would your thoughts be on that pick if they did make that move?
Yeah, so it is a very different style of receiver to Lemon, and it depends on what their preference is, or even your preference to what you want out of your wide receiver. And I think you spelled it out really well with him being, a taller, more traditional X style of receiver. My only concern with him is if we're going to be able to see the separation at the next level.
Right. Yep.
Sometimes I worry about with some of those bigger receivers if how well they'll be able to translate. Some guys do it really well, but sometimes you see some of these guys in the early first round, it takes them a few years to really get up to speed and
Right.
be able to run a full route tree. So that would be really
Yeah.
the only pushback that I would give on Boston.
Okay, yeah, I could totally see that. Maybe the Jets have a world where they go 2 pass catchers. Maybe they go 16 with one guy. Maybe they take Boston at 33. I think that's always a consideration. Maybe or maybe Casey Concepcion. I think could be another name that they could take at 33. Very interesting option. But I don't know. I think I'd rather take Boston if he's still there on the board. I'd rather take Boston at 33 than KC. But staying within the world of the draft, as that's what this episode's primarily about. Is there any sneaky names that maybe you could see the Jets drafting in round 3 and round 4? I think mine that I had was Skylar Gill Howard, D tackle, because I think. They signed Tavondre Sweat this season, but I think that Skylar Gill Howard, if he falls to the 5th round, could make I think he could make a pretty good maybe DT3 for the Jets and have a reliable backup on the squad. What are your thoughts on any sneaky players in the draft this year maybe you think or want the Jets to draft?
Yeah, one of my favorite, I initially was going to say D3, but I've seen this guy move up in drafts a lot, is the center Logan Jones
Yep,
from Iowa.
Iowa. Yep.
A mock in doing my mock drafts. I was picking originally 5th round, and then I noticed he was going in the 4th round, and now I've seen him going even earlier than that on day 2. Just because one, I think he'd be a really good fit in this offense. He's an athletic center, so he moves really well, and I think that would help the Jets, who are projecting to be a very run-heavy team. And it also gives you someone who you could groom behind, the Jets veteran offensive lineman that they have right now in either Myers or Parham, right? Like those are 2 guys on the interior where, they might be fine stopgaps, but I don't know if they're really like super long-term answers. And
Right.
the Jets need to start finding guys outside of, the first couple rounds for their offensive line too. So that's a player that I think is probably 3rd, 4th round, but someone who, wouldn't surprise me if a year from now we're talking about taking the leap to being a starter at the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting name. I've actually seen Logan Jones going in a lot of Jets mock drafts. I think I actually looked at yours on I believe you posted it on Instagram and Twitter, actually, one of those platforms. I forget which one it was, but I looked at one of yours. It was I think pick 178. I believe you had the Jets picking Logan Jones. Another name that I have on the radar, he's a bit of a bigger name, but I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about him enough because of the shadowing of Dylan Thieneman, and that's AJ Halsey. I get the Jets beefed up that safety room this season with the trading of Minka Fitzpatrick and the other safety that we signed. I'm blanking on his name. Can't really remember his name for
Cade
a
Belton.
second. Yes, thank you. Um, of course, the Jets beefed up that safety room in the offseason this season, but AJ Halsey, I think, is one of those guys who can really be. I wouldn't necessarily say a steal because he's still very looked at as arguably the second best safety in this draft class. But I think if he's still there at pick 44, maybe even pick 33, maybe the Jets take a chance on him because I love his upside. He's a little bit of a bigger guy for a safety, but I think that's just what the Jets need. I think they need more beef. I think they need bigger guys. You have Malachi Moore, who is a very aggressive safety. We haven't really seen the best out of him yet, and I'd be really interested to see if they could pair a guy with strong safety and Malachi Moore than AJ Halsey maybe being the starting safeties in a couple of seasons. So I think Halsey is one of those names that I think Jets fans should really look out for. And what are your thoughts on AJ Halsey? Because I think he's one of those names that I think could be a sneaky option for the Jets at pick 44 if he's still there.
Yeah, that's a player I really like in the second round that I agree with you. I think the Jets still need more at that safety position. So the names I'm looking at, Emmanuel McNeil Warren and AJ Halsey as
Yep.
kind of second round options. McNeil Warren might sneak into the back half of the first round, but with the 33rd pick, maybe that would be in play there. I really like Halsey's game. Like you kind of laid out, they could use another bigger safety, and he had 3 interceptions last year too. So as we know, the Jets struggled to create, excuse me, turnovers. So
Yep.
I think it'd be a home run pick.
Absolutely. I think, especially because Dylan Thieneman's been really rising on draft boards recently. I had him actually in my very first mock draft at the time where he wasn't really looked at as a first round talent. I had him going to the Jets at pick 33. I thought it made the most sense, especially before the trading for Minka Fitzpatrick, before they added to that safety room. I thought it made a lot of sense to draft Dylan Thieneman. Unfortunately, he rose a lot in the draft boards. He's projected to go maybe even top 20 in this year's NFL draft. So I think it's great that the Jets have a backup plan in AJ Halsey to go with that second round pick. Um, I think if Halsey falls to 44, I think he might be the pick. I really do. I think it's because that or maybe a guy like Anthony Hill Jr. I think at pick 44 could be a really big one if he falls there. I think, especially if the Jets go edge rusher at 2, I think they have to beef up this linebacker room still. They got Demario Davis. They have Jamin Sherwood. Who do they have really behind that? Not really the most enticing names. Maybe you get a guy like CJ Allen at 16 if he's still there. Again, I'd rather prioritize receiver or tight end over a linebacker at pick 16. But if you have a guy like Anthony Hill Jr., I think that could be a really sneaky option at pick 44 if he's still there. I don't think I'd pick him at pick 33 because I still think there are maybe a couple needs like safety that they should prioritize first over linebacker, especially if they get Arvell Reese, who can play linebacker and drop into coverage. I think they pick maybe safety or receiver at 33. Maybe they go Ty Simpson at 33 as well. But I think Anthony Hill Jr. could be a really sneaky option at pick 44 if he's still there.
Yeah, again, you're speaking my language. Linebacker is one that I think the Jets need to add more at, specifically with considering and keeping in mind the season that Jamie Sherwood just had a year ago. Obviously, really struggled, and I wonder what his fit really is in this defense. So, I'm all about them adding a linebacker at some point. I like Anthony Hill Jr. a lot. I like Jacob Rodriguez a lot. Also projected to be in that second round. So, that's about the range I'd be looking to add a linebacker.
Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji will most likely be looking for a quarterback to at least somewhat secure their job for 2027. I think that's a big part of why they might pick a quarterback this year. And I don't think it's going to be a starting quarterback, especially if it's a round 3 or round 4. I think it's to have your long-term backup, similar to what the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, are doing right now. They selected Will Howard on day 3 last season. They're probably the strongest candidate right now to select Ty Simpson in the first round. I think the Jets could be looking to do that with this year's draft and next year's draft. Get your long-term backup in the 4th round this year, whether that be Drew Aller, Garrett Nussmeier, Carson Beck, or Ty Simpson even in the 2nd round if he's still there. I think they could be looking for a situation like that. Get your long-term backup in the middle of the draft. Get your franchise guy in 2027. Because I was looking at some columns. It does seem like Darren Muji is preparing for that 2027 draft. It does seem like all the roads are leading towards Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, Dante Moore, Jada Mayava, whoever's there, right? I, I don't really have a clear thought on who the most realistic option is at QB. I think if I had to say, it would be Drew Aller right now because Frank Reich really loves those big-bodied quarterbacks, right? Big-bodied guys who can thrive under center, get those intermediate passes out there quickly. I think Drew Aller really fits that resume the best out of any of the mid-round quarterbacks that I think are there. But I just want to get your thoughts on who you think the most realistic QB option is for the Jets to draft this season.
Yeah, I think Aller's a good call out. Rich Samini mentioned him as a name too, and Rich has been around the Jets forever, so that wouldn't shock me, especially because, as you called out with Frank Reich, he kind of fits that profile that he usually goes for. Another name that I like in a similar range is Garrett Nussmeier.
Yep.
He's a little bit smaller, so I don't know if that would necessarily go against his being Frank Reich's preference at the quarterback position, but for me with Nussmeier, I know he didn't have a great year. Same thing with Aller with the injury too. But with Nussmeier, I think with him playing hurt last year, that played a big factor. And I think he has some traits that are translatable at the next level. I know not like the biggest arm, but I think is a smart player who could come in and kind of just operate in an offense that's set up for him. So those are the two I think most popular names outside of the top picks for the Jets, right? Like excluding Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson. I think you'll
Yep.
you'll see a lot of talk about Aller and Nussmeier.
There's another name that I think that maybe could be a sneaky option. This could even fit in the sneaky options topic we had one topic ago. But I think Taylon Green maybe could be an option for the Jets to get at quarterback. He reminds me kind of a lower I don't really know how to describe it. Maybe a lower valued Lenore Sellers in a way. I think I kind of view as Taylon Green as I think that could be a sneaky name for the Jets to get at QB, maybe even later than round 4 if he falls, because I think teams will be prioritizing the big 4 quarterbacks, that being, or not counting Fernando Mendoza, that being Drew Aller, Nussmeier, Beck, and Simpson. I think teams will be prioritizing those big 4 over Taylon Green. So maybe there's a chance that Green falls. He's still there. The Jets don't have a quarterback yet. Maybe all 4 of them are gone, or they needed to prioritize better needs first. I think he could be a really cool option, maybe to test out, maybe be like a Brady Cook type thing. You pick him in the late round, He has upside. Probably not starting material in the NFL. At least we don't know. There have been many quarterbacks. Hell, Tom Brady came in the 6th round. He became the greatest quarterback of all time. Not saying Green is going to be Brady. I don't think anyone is going to be close to Brady. Maybe Mahomes at best. But again, you just never know. You could always hit on these quarterbacks in any round. You wouldn't even know. Brock Purdy, perfect example. Mr. Irrelevant 4 years ago. I think that it could end up being a situation like that this draft. I do still think they want to, and I still want a franchise quarterback in 27, but I think Taylon Green could be one of those guys that could pop up later in the draft that could be an interesting name for the Jets.
Yeah, and he like you talk about guys who have raw traits. That's definitely one of those guys. And he's a little bit of a project, which is why he's going to be a day 3 pick, but has unbelievable size, has a big arm, can move around and run a little bit. I don't think you're drafting him with any intention of him playing this year, but if they feel like they have to come out of this draft with at least another body in the quarterback room, that's somebody on day 3. Similar, I feel like in a way similar to Cole Payton as just
Yep.
like the guy with a bunch of traits who's going to go on day 3.
Absolutely. I think that Green, I think of course, I don't see him playing. I don't even think he's going to be the Jets' backup quarterback. I do think they'll sign someone eventually. I think Cooper Rush is probably my favorite right now for the Jets to sign. But I think Green could be a very interesting option. That's just my thoughts on it. But overall, for you, Matt, what would make this draft a success for the Jets as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's really about adding more depth to your roster in the mid rounds, and you have to come away with a really good defensive player at pick number 2, which is why I would take Arvell Reese. And I think you have to find your number 2 receiver, which is I'm hoping they're able to do with the 16th pick. Other than that, there's a lot of different directions that the Jets can go. So I think from there, you're kind of just filling out your roster depth, which is important. You look at their depth last year was really bad, and that's why with they suffer a few injuries, and the last 4 or 5 games of the year, they're playing guys that we've never heard of off the street. So I just think it's about building up this roster, and it's not necessarily like, oh, they have to come away with this position or this player, as much as it is add another like legitimate impact guy on defense, which you should be able to do at the number 2 pick. Find your wide receiver too, and continue to build out your depth.
Matt, this was awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on to the show today. Make sure you guys check out Matt's channel if you haven't already. Great Jets content over there. Matt, feel free to let viewers know where they can find you. And again, thank you so much for coming onto the show today. Hopefully it's not the last time I have you on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a blast. Thank you for having me on. You can follow along at Matt O'Leary NY on social media and on YouTube.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this special edition of Jack Talks Jets, and I will see you all next time. Peace out, Jet fans.